Welcome back to Investing Talk Podcast. Today we're going to take a look at some recent market activities surrounding Illumina, ticker symbol ILMN. And I think a lot of you already know that Illumina is a major player in the biotech world, particularly when it comes to next-generation sequencing technology. But, things haven't been exactly smooth sailing for them lately. So we're going to take a look at how they're positioned for the future and tackle the question on every investor's mind. Is now the time to buy in, or is caution the name of the game?
Yeah, it's interesting because while Illumina's stock has been on a bit of a roller coaster ride lately, it's actually kind of mirroring what we're seeing across the entire biotech sector. Their price is down significantly from its 52-week high, though we did see a slight uptick just yesterday.
Right. Yesterday, February 19th, ILMN closed at 103.01, which is a 1.89% increase from the previous day. But it's still, as you mentioned, a far cry from that 52-week high of 156.66. And if we look even closer, it's currently trading below both its 50-day and 200-day moving averages. So for context, the 50-day average is at 131.54, and the 200-day average sits at 126.74.
Exactly, and that for investors tends to signal a bearish trend over the medium to long term. But I think what's really noteworthy is this recent price movement is happening against a backdrop of what are actually pretty solid financials for Illumina.
You're right. It does seem like their recent performance has been a bit of a mixed bag. In the third quarter of 2024, they printed a 7% growth in sequencing consumables, but they did face some challenges when it came to instrument sales. But taking a broader view over the last 12 months, they brought in $4.39 billion in total revenue, with a gross margin of 67.61%.
Those are definitely healthy numbers, and it really underscores just how complex their situation is right now. To really understand this, we kind of need to zoom out and look at the bigger picture. This isn't just an Illumina story. The entire biotech sector has been facing some headwinds, and that context is absolutely critical when you're trying to evaluate a potential investment like this one.
Absolutely. And speaking of context, we can't ignore the recent news about Illumina selling off their Grail unit. That announcement alone led to a nearly 6% jump in their stock price.
It was a big move, and this is where things start to get really interesting. Selling off Grail is a strategic decision that has the potential to really reshape Illumina's future in a big way. By divesting Grail, they can now really laser focus on their core strengths, particularly in that next-generation sequencing market, and potentially free up resources for further innovation down the line.
For our listeners who might not be as familiar with Grail, could you give us a little background on why this sale is such a major development?
Sure, Grail's focus has been on developing early cancer detection tests using DNA sequencing technology. While it was, a bold venture for Illumina, it also came with its fair share of regulatory hurdles and complexities. Some might argue that it was distracting them from their main area of expertise.
That makes sense. It sounds like by letting go of Grail, Illumina is aiming to streamline their operations and potentially bolster their overall financial performance, which could be a really attractive prospect for investors.
Exactly, and it's going to be really fascinating to see how the market reacts to this as the situation unfolds. Will investors view this move as a sign of strength and strategic focus, or will it be interpreted as stepping back from a potentially groundbreaking but risky venture? Only time will tell, but it's certainly something we should all be keeping a close eye on.
Absolutely. And on that note, we also have to consider Illumina's reputation for innovation. They're always pushing the boundaries in the genomic space.
Yeah, a great example of this is their new MESAC I100 series. It's a very deliberate move on their part to target new customers with this product, really aiming to make next-generation sequencing more accessible, which could have a significant impact on expanding their market reach.
That's a smart strategy. It seems like they're trying to stay ahead of the curve and attract a wider range of researchers and labs. But at the same time, they're facing the same realities as any other company. Pricing pressures and competition are constant factors.
Right? It's a classic example of the innovator's dilemma. Illumina has to walk this tightrope between constantly innovating to maintain their position as a market leader while also holding their ground against rivals who are looking to undercut their prices or offer alternative solutions.
It's a delicate balancing act for sure. So what's your take on how this will all play out? Can Illumina manage to maintain its dominance while navigating these challenges, or are there storm clouds gathering on the horizon?
Well, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Illumina has set some ambitious goals for themselves. They're aiming for high single-digit growth through 2027 and a double-digit plus EPS compound annual growth rate.
Those are some pretty lofty targets.
They are, and their ability to achieve those goals hinges on a number of factors. Their capacity to continue innovating their success and attracting new customers, and how effectively they can maneuver that competitive landscape and pricing pressures will all play a crucial role.
So it seems like investors are in a bit of a waiting game right now. There's definitely potential for significant upside, but there's also inherent risk given the competitive nature of the market and the ambitious targets Illumina has set for themselves.
Exactly. And that brings us to the question of valuation. Currently, Illumina is trading at about 31 times trailing EBITDA and about 51 times reported earnings from 2015.
For our listeners who are trying to decide whether or not to invest in Illumina, what does this valuation actually tell us? Is this a bargain, a red flag, or somewhere in between?
That's a great question, and it's one that requires, careful thought and consideration. On the one hand, some investors might look at this valuation and see it as a bit high, especially considering the recent volatility in their stock price. But on the other hand, you could argue that this valuation reflects the market's confidence in Illumina's long-term potential, particularly with their strong market share and commitment to innovation.
So it's not a straightforward answer. It really comes down to each individual's investment strategy and risk tolerance.
Absolutely, and it's really crucial to look beyond just the valuation metrics themselves. You also need to factor in things like overall industry trends, the competitive landscape, and Illumina's overall growth strategy when making an investment decision.
It sounds like there's a lot to unpack here, and we're just getting started. After a quick word from our sponsors, we'll delve deeper into those factors that could impact Illumina's future and help you determine if this stock has a place in your portfolio.
So, let's kind of dig into those industry trends we mentioned a little bit earlier. The biotech sector and the genomics space in particular, it's so dynamic and it's evolving at an incredibly rapid pace.
Yeah, it feels like almost every day there's some groundbreaking new discovery or some big announcement.
Exactly right. That's a big part of what makes it such an exciting field to watch. But it also presents some really unique challenges for companies like Illumina. They have to be constantly innovating and adapting if they want to stay ahead of the curve.
So what would you say are some of those key trends that could have the biggest impact on Illumina's future?
Well, one that's impossible to ignore is the growing demand for personalized medicine. As our understanding of genomics advances, we're becoming increasingly able to tailor treatments to individuals based on their own unique genetic makeup.
It really is almost like science fiction's becoming reality.
It really is. And Illumina's sequencing technology is playing a vital role in this field. Their platforms are being used to analyze patients' DNA to identify genetic variations that might make them more susceptible to certain diseases or influence how they respond to different medications.
So it sounds like Illumina's technology is really helping to usher in a whole new era of healthcare.
Exactly. And this trend is only going to gain more momentum in the coming years.
That's exciting, but it also sounds like you could open the door to more competition for Illumina as other companies try to enter this growing market.
That's a good point, and competition is definitely something that Illumina needs to be very aware of. There are a number of other companies out there developing sequencing technologies, and some are even targeting specific niches within that genomics market.
So how is Illumina planning to maintain their position as a leader in this kind of evolving landscape?
Well, it seems like their strategy has two main components. First, they're continuing to make significant investments in research and development to improve the speed, the accuracy, and the affordability of their sequencing platforms.
That makes sense. They have to keep pushing the boundaries of what's possible to stay ahead of the game.
Exactly. And second, they're really actively working to expand their reach into new markets and new applications. So, for example, they're exploring the use of sequencing in areas like agriculture forensics and even consumer genomics.
Wow, so they're casting a pretty wide net.
They are, and it's a smart move. By diversifying their offerings, they're reducing their reliance on any single market and really positioning themselves for growth across multiple sectors.
So it sounds like Illumina is taking a really proactive approach to navigating both the challenges and the opportunities that are emerging in this genomic space.
Absolutely. They're not just sitting back and waiting for things to happen. They're actively investing in innovation, expanding that market reach, and adapting to the evolving needs of their customers.
I think that's really reassuring for potential investors to hear.
It is, but as with any investment, there are always risks that need to be considered.
Right, and we touched on some of those a little bit earlier, like the competitive landscape and pricing pressures.
Yes, and it's important to keep in mind that the biotech sector is inherently volatile. Breakthroughs can happen quickly, but so can setbacks.
And regulatory hurdles can also be a significant obstacle for companies operating in this space.
Absolutely. The approval process for new drugs and technologies can be really lengthy and unpredictable, which can have a direct impact on a company's bottom line.
So for our listeners who are thinking about investing in Illumina, what are some key takeaways that they should keep in mind?
I think the biggest takeaway is that Illumina is a leading player in an industry that's experiencing rapid growth and constant evolution. They have a strong track record of innovation, a solid financial position, and a very clear strategy for future growth.
But we also have to remember that there are always risks involved, just like with any investment.
Exactly. Investors really need to carefully weigh those potential rewards against that inherent volatility and uncertainty that comes with the biotech sector.
It's not a decision to make lightly.
Definitely not. It requires really thorough research, due diligence, and a very clear understanding of your own investment goals and your own risk tolerance.
And speaking of research, we've covered a lot of ground today.
We've looked at Illumina's recent performance, their strategic decisions, the trends shaping the industry, and the factors investors should consider.
It's been a fascinating discussion, but before we wrap things up, I kind of want to circle back to something you mentioned a bit earlier about valuation.
Oh, you're referring to the fact that Illumina is currently trading at a premium compared to some other companies in the market.
Exactly. I think it's important for our listeners to understand what's driving that premium. Why are investors willing to pay a premium for Illumina's stock?
That's a great question, and I think it comes down to a few key factors. First and foremost, Illumina is really the undisputed leader when it comes to next-generation sequencing. They have a dominant market share, a global presence, and a strong reputation for quality and innovation.
So it's almost like you're investing in a blue chip stock in the tech world.
Yeah, that's a great analogy. Investors are often willing to pay a premium for that kind of market leadership and that stability. Secondly, Illumina is operating in an industry that has massive growth potential. Genomics is revolutionizing healthcare, agriculture, and so many other sectors, and Illumina is at the forefront of that revolution.
So in a way, investors are betting on the future growth of that genomics market, and they see Illumina as a key player in that growth.
Precisely. And third, Illumina has a proven track record of delivering strong financial performance. They've consistently grown their revenue and their profits, and they have a very solid balance sheet.
So investors are confident in Illumina's ability to generate those returns, even if they have to pay a premium for the stock up front.
That's right. And all of these factors combined really help to explain the premium valuation that Illumina is currently enjoying.
But of course, there's no guarantee that that premium will last forever.
Of course not. As we've discussed, the biotech sector is inherently volatile, and Illumina faces competition and other challenges, so it's entirely possible that their stock price could decline in the future.
Right, and that's why it's so important for investors to do their own thorough research and carefully consider their investment goals and risk tolerance before making any decisions.
Absolutely. Investing in any stock, especially in a dynamic sector like biotech, requires careful consideration and a long-term perspective.
I think that's a great point. So I think it's probably time for us to wrap up our discussion on Illumina. I agree, we've covered a lot. But before we go, I want to leave our listeners with one final thought. We spent a lot of time talking about Illumina's position and their future growth. But what about the bigger picture? Like the implications of their technology on a larger scale?
Yeah, that's a really important question and one that I don't think gets enough attention.
As genomics becomes, more and more a part of our lives, it's so important to think about, the ethical and social and legal implications of this technology.
Absolutely.
We have to ask ourselves, what kind of future are we building with these investments? And maybe even more importantly, are the companies we're supporting aligned with our values? The kind of world we want to see.
I think those are really crucial questions that all investors should be asking themselves. And in the case of Illumina, their technology really has the potential to do a lot of good in the world. It can help us diagnose and treat diseases, better develop new therapies, and even address global challenges like food security and climate change.
It's amazing to think about the possibilities, but it's also so important to approach this technology with responsibility and awareness of the potential downsides.
You're absolutely right. Making sure that this powerful technology is used ethically and equitably is absolutely essential.
That's a great point to end on. We've covered so much ground today, from Illumina's financials to the big picture implications of their technology. We hope this has given you a better understanding of Illumina and the genomics industry as a whole. And as always, we encourage you to subscribe to our channel, share this episode with anyone who you think might be interested, and leave us a comment with your thoughts. We love hearing from you. Thanks for listening to Investing Talk Podcast.